and then turn you loose, Don. Let me read what the review on Amazon says. Going the Extra Mile portrays real-life stories that push human potential to new heights. Going the Extra Mile is the fourth principle in the 17 principles of personal achievement organized by Napoleon Hill. This principle is portrayed through a collection of stories from various authors. Going the Extra Mile stretches human potential. These stories' aim is to inspire the reader to make positive modifications and improvements in their life. Going the Extra Mile is a collection of inspiring stories based off the fourth principle of personal achievement, researched and authored by Napoleon Hill. These stories are powerful examples of motivation to inspire the reader to consider adapting the going the extra mile principle in their daily living. As a society, we have been conditioned with average and doing what we need to fulfill tasks, but the extra mile contributes in our lives to give us what we want and not what we have to settle with life may give us. We all have the power to change our circumstances, and the principle of going the extra mile allows the effort required to change our life to what we envision it to be. And then all the authors are Napoleon Hill certified instructors and so forth. And then it goes a little further here, and it says, Napoleon Hill's research can help change the lives of people through the 17 principles of personal achievement, laws of success, and Think and Grow Rich, among other astounding texts written by Napoleon Hill. Andrew Carnegie, the initiator of the science of success, inspired young Napoleon Hill in 1908 to make it his life's mission to document the principles of personal achievement after their 3-day interview in New York City. Carnegie introduced Napoleon Hill to some of the most affluent and successful people in history through letters of introductions as a way to provide the necessary research needed to systemize a framework to teach the common man the strategies of success. The Napoleon Hill Foundation today carries out the work of Napoleon Hill, whose life mission was to help people believe that they can achieve their deepest desires once limiting beliefs are removed. Napoleon Hill laid out the 17 principles of personal achievement as a framework to teach the steps of success. The Napoleon Hill Foundation carries out Hill's legacy of the 60-plus years of dedicated service to the teaching of the 17 principles of personal success. The foundation furthers Napoleon Hill's works by producing success literature so that they can further help motivate people to achieve more and follow their desires. Ladies and gentlemen, audience here, it's my honor to bring for the third time on to Right Thinking with Steve Copeland, Don Green, the Executive Director of the Napoleon Hill Foundation. Don, I hope you like that. Did you write that for Amazon?
It's awful familiar. But Hill wrote a lot on it, going the extra mile. He included, he at times he wrote the 5 Essentials was his speech he gave in 1957 when he got an honorary doctorate degree, and he always included it. And he says he got it from Andrew Carnegie, but really there's some references in the Bible where the Jewish people complained about being made beasts of burdens, and their answer, they thought they would get sympathy. Their answer was, when a man asked you to go a mile, go twain. Probably not one person in 1,000 knows what the word twain means twice. It means you're doing more than is required of you. And the advantages is unbelievable. But to start off with, I guess one that sounds the best to people is going the extra mile is one is the wages you receive and money. And of course, money's not the most important thing in the world, but it ranks up there with oxygen. It's hard to live without it. But that's one of the immediate benefits you can expect is going the extra mile. And of course, the other one is the skills you attain. In other words, if you're doing a little bit more than everybody else is doing at the end of the year, I remember the guy who's a mentor and still a close friend. He organized the bank at age 29. He's a very private person, worth lots and lots and lots of money. But he told me on an interview back in 1975, when I was asked to apply for a position at a bank, the second person in the bank, and then it took me 8 years to make bank president. But he told me, he said, you know, Don, if you do a little extra one day, probably nobody's going to notice it. And he said, you continue that for a week, probably nobody's going to notice it. But if you continue to do a little extra all of your life, said some point in your life, you're going to be the success the rest of the world just dreaming about. And I never forgot what he said to me. And of course, I was already practicing it as a young person. They called me hot shot and so forth. because of the results I obtained in the finance industry. I had people working for me twice my age, and I didn't resent being called a hot shot because I had lots of energy. And I progressed real fast up the ranks, and was very proud of what I did. But I was studying this material. I can remember the first jobs I had. I was an outside person and making calls on people, and I never stopped and bought my lunch. I simply carried crackers, sardines, and what we call potted ham in the car in a brown paper bag. And the big treat was pull off the side of the road, a little store somewhere or another, and buy me a Coca-Cola or a Pepsi and eat my dinner. The money I was saving, I bought tapes. I bought books because I was so hungry. I bought Dennis Whaley. I bought Brian Tracy. I bought Zig Zig. I bought all these old guys in Napoleon Hill when they were on cassettes and the old 8 tracks, and I listened to them over and over and over and over till they become a part of me. And not only did I want to read them, but I wanted to read what they read. For example, we could spend a lot of time telling you what all Hill read. Hill was influenced by a lot of other people. The first one, other than his family, was a guy by the name of Samuel Smiles. He wrote a book, I believe, 1859, British, Scottish, and it was called Self-Help Psychology. And it outlined pretty much what Hill followed. It's old English, but I've read it a couple of times over the years. But one of them was Watts. He wrote about the guy that invented the steam engine. He wrote about a guy named Wedgwood that did the Wedgwood china. I think the guy spent 20 years or something perfecting it, and it's the china today that's used in places like the King of England and so forth, and royalty and so forth. But the difference in him and Hill was, Hill just didn't write about those people. He went out and interviewed them in person, but he followed that format of people of going the extra mile, of not just simply having an idea. I read, not long ago, I read the autobiography of Steve Jobs, the co-founder of Apple. And he said of all the qualities he possessed, the one he put the most reliance on was persistence. In other words, having an idea and sticking with it. And Hill used to ask on his tapes, numerous places where he would ask the audience, how many times does the average person quit something other when they have a thought? And the audience will holler 1, 2, 3 different numbers. He said the average is less than 1 because a lot of people have an idea and don't even start. And so the going the extra mile was just naturally, and he told stories, and everything he taught, there's a story behind it somewhere or another. And I think on going the extra mile, the one he talked about, the young bank teller, Carol Downs in Michigan, was probably as good an example as you could get. The young man he was working in a bank as a teller, in which even today tellers are not high priced. That's a good place to start in a bank, but you don't want to remain a teller because you're never going to make a lot of money, and the turnovers is pitiful. I mean, they come and go because they don't pay a lot of money. This young boy was a teller, and it's a Saturday. Bank closed around lunch at noontime, and there was a man come to the door, and he recognized him. He let the man in and told him, said, can I help you? And he said, yes, I'm going out of town. I need a check cashed. This young boy, Carol Downs, tells him, said, well, the bank is closed, but we've not put our money up. I said, I can cash the check. So he cashed the check for the man, and the man gave him his card. He said, if you come by my office, he said, I might have something for you. He said, you'll never make much money as a teller. So he went by, to make a long story short, he went to work, and the first day he goes by the guy's office and says, could I do anything for you? He said, son, that gong went off, which was a bell. It's 5 o'clock, it's quit time. There were about 100 people in the office, I think, at the time for the company. And he said, that's quit time. He said, yeah, but everybody was in such a rush, I thought I would ask if you need anything. He said, yeah, I'm drawing plans for a building, and he said, I need a pencil. He said, there's a supply at the end of the hall, or if you'd sharpen me a good pencil. Well, old Carroll, he sharpened him too and took them back, but he made that a habit and not go through all the details of it because it's enough for a book. But in 6 months, he was promoted and put in charge of a building project, though he had nothing about engineering. He said, your job was simply to be, you stay in touch with the people doing the building. Here's all the suppliers. When they say they need concrete, you contact the people and say that they have it their own time. They have the steel. You just follow up and see it's done so we can finish on schedule. The guy was Will Durant, who founded General Motors. He gave this young boy stock options, and Downs used to go around making speeches, said sharpen that extra pencil, paid him somewhere between $10 and $12 million. That's what he made on the stock. So it's a dramatic story on the benefits of it. But most people are absolutely scared to death to do any more than they're paying for. And they said, well, I'm not getting paid for that. Or when they pay me more, I'll do more. See, they got it backwards. You don't go out and pick apples off a tree until you plant a seed. You have to do the deed to expect the money. And of course, Hill spent a lot of time on, one of the writers was Emerson, one of the new thought leaders, or the title you want to give to him, but he wrote a theory of compensation. Basically, it boils down to, if you do your job and you do it going the extra mile, do more than you're being paid for, if your employer will recognize you, or another employee will recognize the quality of work you're doing and will steal you away. So that was one of the benefits. But he told numerous stories. Even in nature, he told a story of increasing returns. He tells about this Kansas City farmer planting wheat. Now, you know, Steve, if you and I, we planted a grain of corn and only got one grain, we'd all starve to death because we want to eat part of the crop, but we have to turn part of it back and plant it. But Hill told a story of the Kansas farmer that planted a thimble of wheat, and you know, the wheat seed is very, very, very small. But he took that crop and replanted it. I forgot the number of years, but 4 or 5 years, his crop, it was approaching up $100,000 because of nature, better than anywhere, explains the value of increasing returns. In other words, we get back much more than what we put in, and that's the same thing with going the extra mile. We may not receive it immediately, but somewhere or another, we're going to get back more than what we put in. That's the reason you have people making wages. He gives the example of Charles Schwab working for U.S. Steel. He said, "Why would you pay that man $75,000 when that's a ridiculous sum of money in these days when you're talking about the turn of the century?" He said, "Because I don't want my competitors to pay him." And he said, "Also, I pay him as much as $1 million bonus for what he does." So that's going the extra mile, and it's also receiving the awards for it. It's just Steve, he wrote over and over about it. In The Mental Dynamite, he wrote over 100 pages on going the extra mile. The emphasis he put on it. It's one of the longer principles that he wrote more about, and trying to get the emphasis over how important it was for us. Because I remember I did a fundraising with Zig Ziglar at a Christian college, and he said he was in a factory, and said he just walked up to one of the old boys and said, "How long you been working here?" And he said, "Ever since they threatened to fire me." So many people are just trying to do what they can do to get by.
I got to just laugh on that. That's a beautiful remark. People will do the minimum until they are threatened.
Yeah. They're absolutely scared to death. You know, for example, we'll talk about just on a very simple basis. I know from experience, like eating out, you can sign 4 tables to 4 different waitresses, and they'll rotate the customers as they come in. In other words, each one of them is going to get the opportunity to wait on the same number of people. Their tips at the end of the day, there'll be no comparison. They won't be $1 or something or worth difference. There'll be some of the waitresses collect twice as much as what the other ones do, or even more. Why? Because they simply wait on the people, and they make it a pleasure to go in there and eat. It's not the food. You know, the food's got to be decent, but the waitresses don't prepare the food. They only serve it. But this is the people that make you sure you get napkins without asking for them, that make